An abandoned German shepherd witnessed children trapped on a frozen river, and, overcoming his trauma, risked everything to save them. What happened next left an entire town in tears. Between past scars and a brave heart, this four-legged hero transformed lives forever. A story of courage, loyalty, and redemption that will make you believe in miracles. Prepare to be moved. Hit like and comment. Have you ever witnessed an act of animal heroism? Winter in Maple Creek had always been harsh, but that year, the cold seemed to seep into the very souls of the residents. The trees, twisted under the weight of snow, formed ghostly silhouettes against the gray sky. And the river, the same river that welcomed fishermen and smiling children in the summer, now rested beneath a seemingly solid layer of ice. Seemingly. What would happen that Sunday morning would forever change not only the fate of 5 children, but of an entire community that had forgotten the meaning of the word unity. And it all began with a simple invitation, one of those that seem harmless. "Let's go skate on the frozen river." The voice of 9-year-old Lucas echoed through the white-covered valley as his friends gathered at the entrance of the small town. His eyes shone with that innocence only children possess, the kind that fails to see the danger hidden beneath beauty. What no one knew was that watchful eyes observed the group of 5 children walking towards the river. Amber eyes, deep and wounded, belonging to Max, a 7-year-old German shepherd who wandered alone in the area. His black fur mixed with the breed's typical gold was more matted than usual. A scar on his front paw revealed a painful past. But in his gaze there was something more, an almost human intelligence, an understanding of the world that went beyond instinct. Max was no ordinary dog. His past as a rescue animal, trained to find survivors under rubble and snow, had been cut short by a tragedy that left him alone in the world. Abandoned, living off scraps he found, he kept his distance from the humans who had once betrayed him. However, something about those small figures walking cheerfully through the snow sent a tremor through his canine heart. The children laughed loudly as they reached the riverbank. Their hesitant steps tested the solidity of the ice, slipping and playing without noticing that, a few yards ahead, the color of the ice subtly changed. A bluer hue, almost transparent, the silent sign of approaching danger. "Look how I can slide." Sophie, the youngest of the group at just 7, ran ahead of her friends. Her red scarf contrasted against the white landscape like a drop of blood on snow. Her laughter echoed through the valley as she moved away from the safe bank, drawing the others further from solid ground. A few yards away, hidden among snow-covered bushes, Max watched. His body tense, as if every muscle prepared for something his canine mind hadn't yet decided. Memories of training conflicted with the trauma of abandonment. A silent battle raged within him. Approaching humans again meant risking more pain. But something in those children awakened an instinct deeper than fear. It was then that it happened. The sound, that sound that chills the blood of anyone who has ever witnessed an ice accident, began as a whisper. Small cracks, like veins spreading beneath the crystalline surface. The children stopped, suddenly aware of the danger, but it was too late. In seconds, the cracks turned into fissures, and what was solid became liquid beneath their feet. "Help!" Sophie's sharp cry cut through the frigid air as her small body sank into the dark water. The other 4 tried to help, but each movement only hastened the breaking of the ice beneath their feet. In moments, 5 children struggled in the icy water, their desperate hands grasping for any support, while the thermal shock began to paralyze their small bodies. The river water in deep winter is like 1,000 needles piercing the skin simultaneously. The human body reacts dramatically. First shock, then intense pain, followed by a treacherous numbness that seems to ease the suffering, but actually signals the onset of hypothermia. For a child, this process is even faster and more dangerous. Time was running out. Every second in the icy water decreased the chances of survival, and there was no one nearby to hear their cries. No one, except Max. At that critical moment, something awakened in the old rescue dog. As if a switch had been flipped, 7 years of training surged from his canine subconscious. Max didn't think, he acted. Running through the snow with impressive speed for a dog his age, he reached the riverbank. His instincts alerted him to where the ice was still safe. With precise steps, he approached the first hole where Lucas struggled to keep his head above water. The boy, his lips already blue from the cold, widened his eyes upon seeing the imposing figure approach. A wolf, he thought for a moment before realizing those amber eyes showed not threat but determination. Max stretched his neck, his teeth gently gripping the boy's soaked jacket. With a strength born of urgency, he pulled. The ice cracked dangerously beneath his paws, but his training had taught him how to distribute his weight. With calculated movements, he dragged Lucas to the safety of the bank. Without wasting time, Max returned. The second rescue was more difficult. Mia, an 8-year-old girl, was further out, her strength rapidly fading. The German Shepherd had to partially dive into the icy water to reach her. The extreme cold paining his own body didn't deter him. With renewed determination, he managed to bring her to safety as well. One by one, Max rescued all 5 children. Each trip back onto the broken ice demanded more from his aging body. Each return to the frigid water lowered his own body temperature. The scar on his paw throbbed with renewed pain, but in his mind, there was only one mission: save. The last rescue was Sophie, the girl with the red scarf. When Max finally reached her, she barely moved, her eyes half closed as unconsciousness began to take over. With even greater gentleness, the dog brought her alongside the others. 5 children, shivering violently, soaked and shocked, now huddled on the bank, alive, but still in danger. Hypothermia advanced rapidly, and they were too far to return to town on their own. Max, also trembling, observed the children. His instinct told him they needed more help. It was then he noticed a distant figure, an elderly woman walking slowly with her cane on the nearby road. With the last of his strength, Max ran towards her, barking so desperately that the woman immediately understood something was wrong. Eleanor Peterson, 78, had lived in the region her entire life. She knew the signs of nature and the dangers of winter. When she saw the soaked, agitated German Shepherd running towards her, she knew instantly a tragedy was unfolding. With surprising agility for her age, she followed the animal until she found the nearly unconscious children by the riverbank. My God! Her wrinkled hands trembled as she pulled her cell phone from her pocket. The call to 911 was brief and urgent. 5 children, frozen river, advanced hypothermia. The words, broken by gasping breaths, conveyed the gravity of the situation. While they waited, Eleanor did what she could. She removed her own coat to cover Sophie, the smallest and most affected. She instructed the children, who were still responsive, to hug each other to share what little warmth remained in their bodies. And Max, the exhausted hero, lay down beside them, offering the warmth of his furry body as a final act of protection. 15 minutes later, the longest 15 minutes Maple Creek had ever known, sirens announced the arrival of paramedics. The professional rescue was swift and efficient. The children were wrapped in special thermal blankets and rushed to the local hospital. "What about the dog?" asked one of the paramedics, noticing Max watching, trembling, as the ambulances moved. "He saved these children," Eleanor replied, tears in her eyes. "He's a hero." But when they tried to approach, Max backed away. Years of mistrust didn't vanish in moments. With a final glance at the departing ambulances, he disappeared among the snow-covered trees, leaving only paw prints that would soon be erased by the icy wind. The news spread through Maple Creek like wildfire. German Shepherd saves 5 children from drowning in frozen river. The hospital confirmed all children would survive, though 2 of them, Sophie and Mia, remained under observation for more severe hypothermia. Among the frequent visitors at the hospital was Clara Miller, the 5 children's teacher, a 35-year-old woman with kind eyes that hid deep emotional scars. Her recent divorce had shaken her faith in people and love, turning her into someone dedicated to work but emotionally distant. "Teacher, you should have seen him," Lucas recounted for the 10th time, his eyes still wide with the memory of the rescue. "He wasn't an ordinary dog. He seemed to know exactly what to do." Clara smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "He must have been a very special dog." "He had a scar," added Sophie from the next bed, her voice still weak. Here on his paw." She pointed to her own arm. "And his eyes." It was like he understood everything. Something in that description touched Clara deeply. Perhaps it was the way the children spoke of the animal, with an almost spiritual reverence. Or maybe it was the idea of a wounded being who, despite its own suffering, still found the strength to help others. There was a lesson there that resonated with her own emotional wounds. "I wish I could thank him," Clara murmured, more to herself than to the children. "We can find him." Sophie sat up in bed, excited despite her condition. "He must be somewhere around here." Thus began the search for Maple Creek's canine hero. Clara organized search parties and distributed posters with the German Shepherd's description. The rescued children contributed drawings depicting their savior, colorful, imperfect images, but filled with emotion and gratitude. The community, previously divided by disputes over local development, found a common purpose in searching for the hero dog. Neighbors who barely greeted each other now gathered on weekends to explore remote forest areas, calling for a dog who had no name, or at least not one they knew. For Clara, the search became almost an obsession. After school, she drove along back roads, her car filled with blankets and dog food, hoping to find the animal that had touched so many hearts without even trying. "Why is this so important to you?" Eleanor Peterson asked during one of the search meetings, her wise eyes penetrating beyond the teacher's controlled facade. Clara hesitated, surprised by the direct question. I need to believe there are pure acts of kindness in the world, without ulterior motives, without expectations of return. Just kindness." The elderly woman smiled understandingly, covering Clara's hand with her own time-worn one. "You'll find much more than a dog on this search, my dear." 4 weeks passed without success. Winter showed its cruelest face with a series of snowstorms that made searching even more difficult. Some people began to give up, suggesting the animal might have moved on, or worse, not survived the extreme weather after his own plunge into the icy waters. Clara, however, persisted. There was something about this mission that filled a void in her soul she didn't fully understand. It was on a Friday night, as a particularly violent blizzard ravaged the region, that fate intervened. Clara's old car failed on a remote road. 10 miles from town, the engine simply died, leaving her stranded amidst the storm with no cell signal and darkness rapidly closing in. "This can't be happening," she muttered to herself, trying to control the rising panic as she watched snow quickly accumulate around the vehicle. The temperature dropped drastically, and she knew spending the night there would be dangerous. Deciding she needed to seek help, Clara put on all the layers of clothing she had in the car, covered her face as much as possible, and ventured into the storm. The biting wind made it nearly impossible to keep her eyes open, and the deep snow hampered every step. After walking for almost an hour, her strength began to fail. The cold penetrated through the layers of clothing, and exhaustion made each step harder than the last. That's when she spotted an abandoned cabin among the trees, an old hunting post that seemed to offer at least some shelter from the relentless wind. With her last reserves of strength, Clara dragged herself to the wooden structure. The door creaked as she pushed it open, revealing a small, dusty but dry space. By the faint light of her cell phone, which she conserved for emergencies, she scanned the area, looking for anything she could use to warm herself. It was then she heard it, a low growl coming from a dark corner of the cabin. Clara's heart pounded. She wasn't alone. With trembling hands, she aimed the phone's light towards the source of the sound. 2 amber eyes shone in the darkness, reflecting the light like 2 gold coins. A German shepherd, thin and wary, bared his teeth slightly, his tense body ready to attack or flee. "It's you," Clara whispered, immediately recognizing the scar on the paw and the intelligence in the eyes the children had described. The hero. The dog remained alert, but something in the woman's tone made his growl cease. Clara slowly sat on the dusty floor, maintaining a respectful distance. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said softly, using the same tone she reserved for calming frightened children. "Actually, I've been looking for you for weeks." Max, though she didn't yet know his name, watched cautiously. His conflicting instincts made the situation delicate. Years of abandonment had built high walls around his canine heart. But something about the woman before him stirred memories of a time when he trusted humans. Clara slowly opened her backpack and took out a sandwich she had saved for her snack. With deliberately slow movements, she placed it on the floor and pushed it towards the animal. "You saved my students," she continued speaking, her voice an anchor of calm in the storm raging outside. "They talk about you every day. Sophie even draws you in all her schoolwork." The dog hesitated, but the smell of food was too tempting after days of scarce hunting in the deep snow. Cautiously, he took a step forward, then another, until he was close enough to snatch the sandwich. Ate quickly but didn't retreat to his corner, a first sign of trust. Clara kept talking, sharing stories about the children he had saved, about how the community had united to find him, about how he had become a symbol of hope for Maple Creek. Her gentle voice filled the dark cabin with a warmth greater than any fire could provide. The night wore on, and the cold intensified. Clara began to shiver violently, despite all her layers. Noticing this, Max did something surprising. He moved closer and lay down beside her, offering the warmth of his body as he had done with the children on the day of the rescue. Silent tears streamed down Clara's face. This animal, who had every reason to distrust humans, was once again putting someone else's needs above his own. The lesson in compassion was not lost on her. "Thank you," she whispered, gently placing a hand on the dog's coarse fur. To her surprise, he didn't pull away. It was the first human touch Max had willingly accepted in over a year. When morning came and the storm finally subsided, a search party found Clara and Max still in the cabin. The news that the hero dog had been found spread rapidly. The 5 rescued children were the first to want to visit, but Clara, understanding the animal's cautious nature, asked for patience. Upon taking Max to a local veterinary clinic, another discovery was made. He had a microchip. The information revealed his name was indeed Max, and he had belonged to Miguel Santos, a firefighter who had died during a wildfire rescue operation. The firefighter's widow couldn't cope with the reminder, explained the vet, Dr. Evans, as he carefully examined the German Shepherd. Apparently, she abandoned the dog in a remote area about a year ago. This revelation added new weight to Max's story. He wasn't just an abandoned dog. He was a dog who had lost his human companion in tragic circumstances, only to be rejected by the remaining family. He was going through his own grief, Clara murmured, gently stroking the animal's head as the vet completed the exam. The connection between them grew with each passing hour, 2 wounded souls recognizing the same pain in each other. It was during this exam that Dr. Evans made another troubling discovery. Max suffered from a congenital heart condition that, without treatment, would drastically shorten his lifespan. "He'll need continuous medication and possibly surgery in the future," the vet explained, his face reflecting professional concern. "It's an expensive and specialized treatment." Clara, still recovering financially from her recent divorce, felt the weight of this responsibility. But looking into those amber eyes, now showing the first glimmer of trust, she knew she would do anything to help the animal that had touched so many lives. "We'll find a way," she stated with determination. In the following weeks, Max's adaptation to his new life was gradual and not without challenges. Clara transformed part of her small house into a special space for the dog, with a comfortable bed and toys he initially ignored, but eventually began to appreciate. The rescued children were introduced one by one, in short, controlled visits. Sophie, the girl with the red scarf, was first. Her reunion with Max was emotional. The dog recognized her immediately, his tail wagging slightly as he sniffed the girl he had carried to safety. "He remembers me," Sophie exclaimed, her eyes shining with tears of joy. Sitting on Clara's living room floor, she gently petted the now clean and shiny fur of the German Shepherd. "I dream about you every night," she confessed to the animal, "but now I'm scared of water." This innocent confession revealed another dimension of the trauma. The children carried emotional scars from the accident. Sophie, in particular, had developed an intense fear of water, refusing even to take a bath without extreme anxiety. In subsequent meetings, Clara noticed something extraordinary. Max seemed to perfectly understand Sophie's fear. When the girl showed signs of anxiety talking about water, he would gently rest his head on her lap as if saying, "I'm here. You're safe." This special connection gave the teacher an idea. With Sophie's parents' permission and proper psychological guidance, Clara began using Max's presence as part of the girl's trauma recovery process. They started simply, a basin, with a few inches of water where Sophie could dip her fingers while Max remained by her side. The dog's calm, protective presence provided emotional security that no adult could offer. Progressively, the other rescued children also benefited from informal therapy with Max. Lucas, who had developed recurring nightmares, found comfort sleeping over at Clara's sometimes, with the German Shepherd standing guard beside his makeshift bed. Anna, who had become overly cautious and fearful, rediscovered her courage walking Max, first in the yard, then around the neighborhood. These transformations did not go unnoticed in small Maple Creek. The vet, impressed by Max's positive impact on the children, suggested formalizing him as a therapy dog. "He has a natural instinct for it," Dr. Evans observed during a follow-up appointment. "With proper training, he could help many others besides these 5 children." The idea was exciting, but there was a significant obstacle. Max's heart condition was worsening. Medications helped, but the surgery, costing nearly $20,000, became increasingly urgent. It was Eleanor Peterson who suggested the solution during one afternoon visit with Clara and Max. The elderly woman, who had become a constant presence in the makeshift new family, mentioned an old local tradition. "In the old days, when someone in the community needed help, we'd have quilting bees," she explained, her wrinkled fingers absently stroking Max's ears. "Each family would contribute a patch telling a story of hope, and together, we'd create something bigger than any one person could make alone." Clara's eyes lit up with the idea. "We could adapt that into a fundraiser." The community embraced the project enthusiastically. The local church hall was transformed into a space for the Patches of Hope for Max event. Each family was invited to create a patch for a giant community quilt, which would be auctioned to help cover the surgery costs. More important than the patch itself was the story accompanying it. Accounts of moments when hope prevailed over despair, when kindness overcame cruelty, when the community united despite differences. Each patch sewn to the next created not just a physical quilt, but a renewed social fabric for Maple Creek. The event was scheduled for a Saturday in June, when spring had completely melted the river ice and filled the region with colorful flowers. However, nature had other plans. An unseasonably strong summer storm caused a flash flood that isolated several families in more remote areas of the region. Max, who accompanied Clara in all the event preparations, was the first to sense the danger. His behavior changed drastically. On the morning of the event, restless, barking insistently towards the hills where some isolated farms were located. "What is it, Max?" Clara tried to understand, perplexed by the usually calm animal's sudden agitation. That's when the phone rang. The natural dam formed by fallen logs had given way during the night, and several properties were rapidly flooding without warning. Families were trapped, including elderly people and small children. Without hesitation, Max ran to the door, looking at Clara with the same determination he had shown on the day of the ice rescue. The message was clear. He needed to help. But, "Your heart?" Clara protested, aware of the risk any intense physical exertion posed to the sick dog. Max barked once, resolute. Some callings transcend even self-preservation. With a heavy heart, Clara took Max to the flood site. Rescue teams were already mobilized, but the exact location of some isolated families remained uncertain. This was where Max's original rescue, dog training, proved invaluable. Following his keen sense of smell and sharp instincts, Max guided responders through safe paths to an isolated family. The Martinellis, an elderly couple living in a small cabin in the hills, now surrounded by turbulent waters. Mr. Martinelli had fallen and broken his leg trying to reach higher ground, and his wife, with early-stage Alzheimer's, was too disoriented to call for help. "How did you find us?" Mr. Martinelli asked as he was placed on the stretcher. "Nobody knows this back path." "It was Max," replied one of the responders, pointing to the German Shepherd who was already sniffing the air, searching for others needing help. "He led us right to you." This second act of heroism, however, came at a high cost. After hours assisting in the search, Max collapsed, his heart overwhelmed by the effort. Dr. Evans, who was part of the emergency medical team, immediately recognized the severity of the situation. "We need to operate on him now," he declared urgently, while examining the unconscious dog. "We can't wait any longer." Clara nodded, silent tears streaming down her face. "Do whatever it takes. We'll find the money somehow." The surgery lasted 5 hours. 5 hours during which Clara didn't leave the veterinary clinic's waiting room. 5 hours during which the news spread through the community. The hero dog, who had already saved 5 children and now helped rescue more families, was fighting for his own life. People began arriving at the clinic. First the 5 children, from the frozen river and their parents, then Eleanor Peterson and other residents, and finally, the entire community touched by Max's extraordinary story. They brought food, blankets, coffee, and most importantly, hope and prayers for the animal, who had taught everyone the meaning of courage and compassion. When Dr. Evans finally emerged from the operating room, his exhausted face broke into a cautious smile. "He's a fighter," he announced to the now crowded waiting room. "The surgery was successful, but recovery will be long and delicate." A collective sigh of relief echoed through the room. Clara, who hadn't realized she was holding her breath, finally collapsed into a chair, allowing herself to cry openly. This time, tears of gratitude. As for the bill, she began hesitantly, looking at the vet. "It's already paid," interrupted a voice from the back of the room. An elderly man, whom Clara recognized as Mr. Martinelli, stepped forward leaning on makeshift crutches. "We all chipped in. This dog taught us what it means to be a community again. The least we can do is ensure he has a chance at a long, healthy life." It was then revealed that during those 5 hours of surgery, something extraordinary had happened in Maple Creek. News of Max's collapse spread quickly, and people spontaneously began donating. Small amounts, large sums, whatever they could offer. The Max Fund, as it was informally called, not only covered the surgery costs but secured resources for all the future care the animal would need. Max's recovery was slow but steady. Clara completely adapted her routine to care for him, waking up in the middle of the night for medications, preparing special meals for his restricted diet, taking him to canine physical therapy sessions. Her small apartment became an informal visiting center, with the rescued children regularly stopping by to read stories to the convalescing dog. It was during this recovery period that Clara realized how her own life had transformed. The emotional wounds from her divorce, which once seemed insurmountable, were now just scars, marks of a painful past, but not defining her future. Just as Max carried his paw scar with dignity, she learned to carry her own emotional scars. When autumn arrived, painting Maple Creek's leaves in shades of red and gold, Max was sufficiently recovered to begin his formal training as a therapy dog. His natural instinct, combined with exceptional intelligence and gentle temperament, made him a perfect candidate. The local hospital soon became his second home. The presence of the hero dog, as he was still affectionately called, brought invaluable comfort to patients of all ages. Children undergoing cancer treatment found strength to face another chemotherapy session after a few minutes with Max. Elderly patients in rehabilitation pushed harder in their exercises when the German Shepherd watched them with his encouraging amber eyes. Clara, inspired by the transformation Max had wrought in so many lives, including her own, started an educational program about animal rescue in local schools. Four-Legged Heroes, as she called the project, taught children about responsibility, compassion, and the priceless value of the human-animal bond. When winter returned to Maple Creek, marking a full year since the dramatic rescue on the frozen river, the community organized a special ceremony. The Snowflake Festival, a local tradition, dedicated its main event to Max's story. The community hall was packed, not just with locals, but with people from neighboring towns and even some television crews who had become interested in the German Shepherd's extraordinary journey. Max, wearing an elegant blue bandana that partially hid his heart surgery scar, stood calmly beside Clara, occasionally licking Sophie's hand when the girl showed signs of nervousness. It was amidst this celebration that a sudden silence fell over the hall. An unknown woman had entered, tall, slender, her face marked by deep sadness despite her beauty. In her arms, she carried a simple bouquet of flowers and an old leather collar. "It's her," someone murmured in the crowd. "The firefighter's widow." Laura Santos had traveled over 200 miles after seeing a report about Max on regional television. The face of the German shepherd she had abandoned a year earlier, in a moment of unbearable grief after losing her husband, brought forth an avalanche of conflicting emotions. Max recognized her instantly. His entire body tensed, his ears alert. A slight tremor ran through him as conflicting memories surfaced in his canine mind. The familiar scent of the woman who was once part of his family, but also the memory of abandonment. Clara felt her own heart clench. For months she had built a mental image of the woman who abandoned Max, someone cruel and insensitive. But before her stood just another person broken by life, trying to rebuild herself from the pieces. The encounter forced everyone present to confront complex feelings of loss and forgiveness. Laura walked slowly towards Max, kneeling at a respectful distance. "I'm so sorry," she said simply, her voice choked with emotion. "I wasn't in a place to care for you when Miguel passed. It hurt too much to look at you and remember him." Tears flowed freely down her face. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed you to know it was never your fault." Max looked at her for a long moment, then at Clara, as if pondering the meaning of this unexpected reunion. Then, to everyone's surprise, he took a step forward and gently licked Laura's outstretched hand. It wasn't complete forgiveness. Some wounds run too deep to fully heal, but it was an acknowledgement of their shared past, an acceptance that suffering had shaped them all. Clara now faced her greatest challenge, the possibility of losing Max to his original owner. Legally, Laura had rights to the animal. Emotionally, the bond between Clara and Max had become profound and transformative for both. The 5 rescued children, now physically and emotionally recovered thanks in large part to Max's presence in their lives, passionately argued for the dog to remain with Clara. Sophie, in particular, who had overcome her fear of water with the German shepherd's help, expressed what everyone felt. "Max saved our lives, and then Miss Clara saved his life," she declared with the simple wisdom of an 8-year-old. They chose each other. After long conversations between Clara and Laura, mediated by Dr. Evans and with occasional input from Eleanor Peterson, a surprising solution emerged: shared custody of Max. Laura, now working as a nurse and moving to a nearby town, could spend some weekends with the dog. Clara would maintain primary guardianship, ensuring the continuity of Max's therapy work. This unconventional solution created an extended family for Max, a perfect reflection of the community and cooperation values that had resurfaced in Maple Creek thanks to his presence. At the closing of the Snowflake Festival, Max was officially honored as the Guardian of Maple Creek. A commemorative plaque was installed on the riverbank where it all began, telling his story for future generations. The 5 rescued children presented a special play titled Through Max's Eyes, retelling his story, but from the hero dog's perspective, imagining his thoughts and feelings during the rescue. The performance moved everyone, especially when, at the end, each child revealed how the experience had shaped their dreams for the future. Lucas wanted to be a veterinarian. Mia dreamed of training rescue dogs. Anna planned to become a trauma therapist. Ethan already talked about becoming a firefighter. And Sophie, the girl with the red scarf who almost didn't survive that fateful day, declared with conviction that she would be a teacher. Like Miss Clara, who teaches us it's worth fighting for those we love. Clara, watching this scene with Max faithfully by her side, felt profound gratitude for all the paths that had converged at that moment. The German shepherd who had entered her life amidst a snowstorm had brought far more than companionship. He had brought healing, purpose, and a powerful lesson about unconditional love. At the end of the ceremony, as people slowly dispersed, she knelt beside Max, looking directly into his amber eyes, that now held not just intelligence, but a serenity earned through many trials. "You're not just a hero, Max," she whispered, hugging the animal's furry neck. "You're a bridge between past and future, between pain and healing, between strangers who became family." Max responded in his own way, with a gentle nudge of his head and a gaze that seemed to perfectly understand the miracle they had both experienced. The miracle of finding home not in a place but in the beings we choose to love and protect. Thus ends the story of the German Shepherd who rescued 5 children from a frozen river. But like all great stories, this isn't really an ending. It's just the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where the scars of the past are not forgotten, but transformed into badges of honor. Where abandonment gives way to belonging, and where the truest heroism reveals itself not in grand dramatic moments, but in the quiet courage to open one's heart, day after day, to the possibility of love. In Maple Creek, when winter once again turns the river into a mirror of ice, the residents look at the commemorative plaque and tell visitors, "There's a guardian who watches over our children. His name is Max, and his story reminds us that the strongest bonds aren't the ones we're born with, but those we forge when we choose courage and love, even when it would be easier to simply turn our backs and walk away."